What if the brightest star of men's tennis was already breaking apart from the inside, and nobody dared to admit it? It sounds impossible, almost unthinkable. Yet the world saw it happen in plain sight under the blinding lights of Arthur Ashe Stadium, and most of us didn't even realize the gravity of that moment. The cameras didn't lie. They captured everything. The grimace carved across Jannik Sinner's face, the sharp gesture to his abdomen, the way his body folded in on itself after a single serve. In that instant, the golden boy of tennis looked less like a champion in control of his destiny and more like a young man betrayed by his own body. Thousands in the stadium gasped. Millions watching at home leaned forward, wondering, was this the beginning of the end? On paper, it was just a medical timeout in a semifinal. In reality, it was something far darker. You could see it in his steps, slower than usual. You could hear it in the silence that followed his complaint to the umpire. And you could feel it in the unease that spread through the commentary box. This wasn't a cramp. It wasn't dehydration. It was something deeper, something that made even seasoned analysts whisper that Sinner's reign at the top might be living on borrowed time. Let's rewind. He was leading against Felix Auger-Aliassime, one set up, serving with confidence, dictating the pace of play. Then at 4-3 in the second set, it all shifted. A serve, a twitch, a hand to his stomach. His face twisted in pain as if something inside him had snapped. He tried to soldier on, but the change was obvious. His first serve percentage collapsed. The speed of his delivery dropped. Suddenly, the world number one looked like a shadow of himself. And here's where the story sharpens. His coaches on the sidelines, Darren Cahill and Simone Vanozzi, didn't wear the poker faces of calm professionals. They looked rattled, whispering frantically between games, their expressions betraying panic. You don't react like that to a minor discomfort. You react like that when you fear something catastrophic. Sinner, of course, tried to play it down. He even went on to win that semifinal in 4 sets, brushing off questions in the press room with a forced smile and the kind of scripted reassurance that fans have heard 1,000 times. I'm fine. Just a little pain. Nothing serious. But anyone who had watched closely knew better. The stiffness in his movement, the hesitation in his serve, the discomfort written across his face, it all told a different story. This wasn't an isolated moment. It was the culmination of a summer of strain. Back at Wimbledon, he had fallen awkwardly, banging his elbow against the turf. In Cincinnati, he had to retire from a final after just 5 games, supposedly due to a virus. But even then, his energy had seemed to be fading long before the illness was confirmed. And now, under the brightest lights of the U.S. Open, the cracks were no longer hidden. They were tearing open in front of the entire world. For fans in Britain, this scene evoked a familiar kind of dread. We've seen our own heroes, Andy Murray for one, fight battles against their bodies, clinging to greatness while pain dragged them down. We know how brutal tennis can be, how quickly glory can unravel. And watching Sinner clutch his stomach, you couldn't help but wonder, was history about to repeat itself with another young prodigy? This wasn't just a warning sign for Jannik Sinner. It was a warning sign for the sport itself. The game demands so much power, speed, endurance, yet offers so little mercy. At just 24 years old, the Italian star who had climbed to number 1 looked as if he had aged a decade in a single night. And that leaves us with a haunting question. What happens when the body of a champion refuses to obey, even at the peak of his career? Because make no mistake, this was not the end of the story. In fact, it was only the beginning. The truth is, what unfolded in New York didn't come out of nowhere. The signs were there all along, small cracks in the armor that, when ignored, eventually widened into a fracture no one could overlook. To the outside world, Jannik Sinner was unstoppable, the new number 1. A Grand Slam champion, the heir apparent to Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. But behind the headlines, his body had been sounding alarms for months. Let's go back to Wimbledon. Center court, 4th round, against Grigor Dimitrov. It looked like just another step on his march toward destiny, until he slipped. The fall wasn't dramatic enough to make the evening highlights, but to those watching closely, it mattered. He braced himself with his right arm, then shook it out with a flicker of pain. The cameras moved on, but his elbow didn't. Within hours, rumors spread. MRI scans, adjustments in training, even a quiet switch to indoor practice sessions instead of grass. Officially, he was fine. Unofficially, his serve had lost its bite. Then came Cincinnati, a final against Carlos Alcaraz, exactly the kind of clash the tennis world craved. But something was off before the match even began. His shoulders drooped, his steps seemed heavy. Within 5 games, he retired, citing a virus. But the whispers grew louder. Was it really just illness, or was his body already breaking down under the grind of a relentless season? By the time he landed in New York for the U.S. Open, even he admitted he wasn't at 100%. He withdrew from the mixed doubles to conserve energy, telling reporters he needed extra recovery. For a 24-year-old world number one, that single phrase, extra recovery, spoke volumes. Champions don't talk like that unless they're already running on empty. Here's the cruel paradox. The very thing that makes you great can also be the thing that destroys you. To become number one, Sinner had played an exhausting schedule, winning 37 matches and reaching 5 straight Grand Slam finals in just over a year. Every victory added glory, but also pressure. Every tournament defended was another battle his body had to survive. And unlike footballers who get a summer break, or cricketers who rotate formats, tennis players live in a cycle that barely allows them to breathe. 11 months, week after week, surface after surface, jet lag, training, recovery, repeat. And Sinner was expected to carry more than just himself. He was the pride of Italy, the face of new endorsements, the man meant to challenge the Spaniard Alcaraz for the future of tennis. That crown glittered on his head, but it came with a crushing weight. His team downplayed every setback. His federation stayed silent, and the sponsors smiled, but his body was screaming. For British fans, the parallels were chilling. Andy Murray, once the indestructible warrior of Wimbledon, had walked this same path. The hip surgeries, the sleepless nights, the silent agony hidden behind clenched jaws and brave press conferences. Murray was nearly 30 when the injuries caught him. Sinner is only 24. And yet, he kept pushing. Wimbledon win, Cincinnati collapse, U.S. Open arrival, each step a gamble, each performance masking pain. It's almost poetic in its cruelty. The higher he climbed, the more fragile he became. So when he doubled over in New York, pointing to his stomach, it wasn't an isolated collapse. It was the breaking point of a journey that had been spiraling towards disaster for months. The burden of glory had become unbearable. The stage could not have been bigger. The U.S. Open final, New York buzzing, the promise of a new rivalry to define the next decade. Jannik Sinner versus Carlos Alcaraz. Youth against youth. Fire against fire. It should have been a clash of equals. A night where the world number one proved why he held the crown. But from the very first games, it was clear this wasn't an equal fight. Sinner's serve, normally his most improved weapon, had lost its thunder. The statistics painted the picture with merciless clarity. His first serve percentage sank to just 48%, miles below his season average of 65. His returns, usually sharp as a razor, floated harmlessly back. The scoreboard told the story brutally. 6-2, 3-6, 6-1, 6-4. One-sided. Unforgiving. Carlos Alcaraz sensed it instantly. The Spaniard, all raw energy and explosive movement, smelled weakness like a predator in the wild. He didn't just play against Sinner. He hunted him. Time and again, he forced the Italian wide to his backhand, dragging him into stretches that made his stomach scream louder with every lunge. By the third set, Alcaraz was sprinting, leaping, smiling even, while Sinner looked like a man pushing through quicksand. And the numbers? They were catastrophic. 28 unforced errors, only 21 winners, broken 5 times. The kind of statistics you expect from a qualifier facing a top seed, not from the number one player in the world. But perhaps the most telling detail wasn't in the numbers. It was in Sinner's body language. Between points he shuffled, his face drawn tight, his eyes dimmed of fire. At one stage, trailing 6-5 in the third, he almost looked resigned, accepting not just defeat but something worse, the knowledge that his body would not allow him to compete. Afterward, experts spoke with the bluntness fans had already seen with their own eyes. Simon Rea, Nick Kyrgios' former coach, admitted he looked like he was carrying something. He was missing a gear. Nicole Pratt, Australia's Billie Jean King Cup captain, echoed the sentiment. You don't lose sets 6-1 in Grand Slam finals unless something's wrong. Even Alcaraz himself seemed surprised by how little resistance he faced. But here's the darker truth. This wasn't just one bad day. This was the cost of a culture that tells players to hide pain, to smile through agony, to pretend every muscle spasm is just a little niggle. We have seen it before. Murray with his hip, Nadal with his foot, Djokovic with his elbow. The same script played again and again. And what makes it so haunting is the silence. His federation offered no clarity. His team muttered reassurances. His sponsors avoided the subject. The media, desperate for storylines, moved on. But anyone who looked closely saw the reality. Sinner was injured, and he was trying to mask it. For British fans, it's impossible not to remember the years when Andy Murray did the same, playing through pain, hiding the truth until it became undeniable. By the time he admitted it, it was too late. His body had already surrendered. Watching Sinner on that New York court felt like déjà vu. Only this time the decline wasn't happening to a man in his 30s. It was happening to a 24-year-old at the peak of his career. So the duel in New York was never really between two equals. It was between a body that had betrayed its owner and a rival who knew exactly how to exploit it. Alcaraz lifted the trophy. Sinner, meanwhile, was left with more than just a defeat. He was left with a terrifying question. Had his reign already begun to crumble? In the aftermath in New York, the scoreboard told only half the story. Yes, Alcaraz triumphed, and yes, Sinner fell short. But the deeper truth wasn't written in numbers. It was written in the grimace on his face, the hesitation in his movements, the silence of a team that knew more than they were saying. Now comes the reckoning. Sinner stands at a crossroads, and both paths are cruel. On one side, keep playing, push through the pain, defend the crown, and cling to the #1 ranking. On the other, stop, confront the injury, surrender tournaments, and risk slipping down the ladder while rivals surge ahead. Either choice carries consequences that could shape not just his season, but his career. And here's where the tragedy deepens. He is only 24, an age when most players are still learning to master their craft. He should be flying free, not shackled by pain. He should be building his legacy, not protecting his body like a veteran at the twilight of a career. Yet modern tennis has no mercy. The calendar is unforgiving. 11 months of travel, constant pressure, no off-season to heal. Legends like Federer and Nadal once made it look effortless, but the sport today is faster, heavier, more brutal, perhaps even unsustainable. British fans know this story too well. We've watched the Andy Murray walk through this same fire, refusing to yield until his hip forced him to the operating table. We saw the tears at press conferences, the uncertainty of whether he'd ever hold a racket again. For Murray, the fight became about survival, not dominance. And watching Sinner now, you cannot help but wonder if he is being dragged into that same cruel script, only a decade earlier than anyone expected. The silence around his condition is deafening. His team insists it's minor. His federation stays vague. The sponsors smile and hope for the best, but insiders whisper about core instability, a phrase that carries the chill of long-term danger. Abdominal and oblique injuries aren't just painful, they're career-threatening. Every serve, every forehand twist, every sudden change of direction risks deepening the damage. To keep playing could be to gamble with permanence. And yet, the pressure to keep going is enormous. Every ranking point matters. Every tournament skipped opens the door for Alcaraz to tighten his grip on dominance. Every withdrawal raises questions in the press and panic among fans. Behind the endorsements, the trophies, the headlines, there is still a young man from Italy who once just wanted to play tennis without pain. Now he finds himself in a cage built of expectations. The bigger question is this: what does it mean for tennis itself? If a 24-year-old #1 is already breaking down, what does that say about the demands of the modern game? Are we watching not just one player's reckoning, but a reckoning for the sport as a whole? A generation of rising stars is being asked to play at full throttle year-round with no chance to recover. If they collapse before they reach their prime, what future does tennis have? And so we arrive at the choice that defines Jannik Sinner's next chapter. Does he risk everything for the short-term glory of staying #1? Or does he gamble on his future, step away now, and trust that his talent will carry him back when he is whole again? This isn't just about trophies, it's about identity, health, and the cruel truth that greatness often demands more than the human body can give. So I leave you with this. If you were in his shoes, 24 years old, at the very top with the world watching, would you fight through the pain to defend your crown, or would you walk away to protect the years ahead? Let me know what you think in the comments. Is this the beginning of the end for Jannik Sinner's dominance, or just a brutal detour on his way to an even greater future? And if you want to follow every twist and turn of this unfolding drama, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because this story is far from over.